Welcome to Modern Animism Radio. I'm Laura Giles, your host. Thanks for tuning in. And we have a guest today. I'm going to be talking with Canadian author and love activist Tara Bianca about what she calls the tantra of life. It sounds juicy, doesn't it? And I know you can't wait to dive in. So let's take a moment to give gratitude to the ancestors and elements. Acknowledge and thank the element of earth for all our sensuous, wonderful things that surround us every day. The sun, the moon, our food, our bodies, the bees, watermelons, everything that helps to sustain our physical existence. Thank you, earth. Acknowledge and thank the element of air for all the fabulous things we can't see, like the breath that sustains our lives, inspiration that keeps our minds fertile, imagination, discernment, and communication to keep us connected to each other and on the other side of the veil. Acknowledge and thank the element of fire for our power, desire, the ability to manifest things in a responsible way. Thank you for the passion that keeps us going. Acknowledge the element of water. Water. Water's life. It nourishes all life on earth. It helps us to grow, to go deep, to feel, to explore our intuitive side. Acknowledge and thank the loving, helping ancestors from the human, plant, animal, and mineral kingdoms. I thank you for all your help that we receive that is both seen and unseen. And thank you to our listening community for being here today. Thank you for your questions, support, and donations. If you have any comments or questions, don't be shy. We want to hear from you. And you can also review us on iTunes. That would help a ton. Finally, thank you, Tara Bianca, for being our guest, and welcome.
It's my pleasure and my privilege. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to share such beautiful teachings with people.
So Tara, I have to say that I was intrigued by the phrase tantra of life. That's actually what caught my attention. Before we get to that, though, can you share with us a little bit about your spiritual journey? It seems that it always starts with disillusionment, some stumbling, and then some successes. And has yours been like that?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I've had a really fascinating life from my conception, where I was conceived in really kind of dark circumstances, and even I was carried within my mother when she worked at a psychiatric ward, the night shift, the whole time she was pregnant as a single, pregnant person, and into a hospital where I lived for 6 months because of various situations that happened to my mom and myself while we were there. And really fascinating, challenging times. And I had this throughout my life, like in really extreme challenges. And when I was 6 years old, I was very fortunate. I started to really ask questions about the universe and creation and what's this all about. And no one can answer those questions for me. I checked in with all the other adults in my parents' lives, and no one, had those answers, and they certainly laughed at me or kind of turned me away because the questions were too big for them, I think. And so I felt like I was really on my own. So I really turned to the divine, and I asked for, incredible mentorship. And I just trusted if there is a creator of everything, then that creator is going to mentor me. And I just made that assumption, and it started to happen. And I started to receive beautiful mentorship from the divine, interestingly enough, through all of creation, as well as through like a direct personal experience. And so throughout my life, I started to grow in really beautiful gifts, like being a very, very powerful empath and psychic. Those came with challenges as well, because I didn't understand them to the degree that I had them in comparison with other people, and I didn't have any mentors. So it was a really, really kind of stuck, challenging times at times, especially when I was going through my teens. We didn't have the internet back then. There were no local bookstores that touched on any of these topics. And I lived in a small town and everything. So I was quite isolated and alone in it. And so I really relied on nature. I relied on the divine. I relied on my own intuition and these beautiful teachings that I began to receive.
So how did you get introduced to the divine so young? Was that part of your upbringing?
Yeah, well, what happened was my mother was a Catholic, and my stepfather was a Protestant, and so they would split us kids, and half the family would go to Protestant church, and the other half would go to Catholic church. And because I don't know, I always felt such a connection with the divine, and so I always thought, well, I guess this is where you do it, is in church, and I made that assumption. And until I came into, a challenge with the church itself. I actually became an altar boy. Back then, you couldn't even be considered an altar girl. And so I was serving the Mass. I was 10 years old, and I was learning everything I could. And one day the Archbishop came to town, and they told me I couldn't serve Mass. And I said, why? And they said, because you're a girl. And I said, this is ridiculous. Even as a 10-year-old, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing. And so they didn't give me much more explanation. So I just walked out, and I told my parents I wasn't going back. And then when I turned 13, I still was in mentorship with the divine. The divine was teaching me very strongly. And I kept thinking, well, I should be in church. It'll enhance it more. And so I went back to church when I was 13 by myself. And when I was there, it felt dead. Mm. It was so, in comparison to the aliveness and the richness of the mentorship I was receiving outside of, the church. When I was there, the divine even said to me, there's no energy in this, like, leave. And I was like determined. I was like, no, I'm going to stay till the end of Mass. And I did. And I even came back the next week, and it was even more clear to me. And the divine was even clearer to me, like, do not come here to connect. Everything is by rote, and it's dead. There's no energy in it. And so I walked out of Mass, I think halfway through the Mass. And then I really had no attachment to it whatsoever. And then things really started to intensify after that, when I realized that everything needed to be just in connection, direct connection with the divine. And so then I began my path, and I started to actually encounter some dark energies. As my psychic abilities opened and my third eye opened, I could really see light energies, dark energies, and things like that. And it really freaked me out. I couldn't speak to anybody about it because I thought they would think I was crazy. And so I went through this real beautiful mentorship with it for about 10 years. It was quite traumatic, but I was learning quite a lot. And then I met a man by happenstance. And he was this very spiritual man. It's the first spiritual person I ever met. And he was studying with a guru in India, and they were experiencing really profound, he was experiencing profound experiences with this guru who wasn't physically present here in Canada, but was bilocating to meditate with this spiritual teacher and leaving him artifacts like bracelets and things like that to prove that he had physically been there. And so he was telling me about this, and he was a doctor, a medical doctor, and I actually met him for a medical appointment. He was somehow trusting me, relaying this information to me, and I was trusting him, relaying my information. And when I told him what was going on for me, he said, he's like, you're having a spiritual awakening, and it's not what you think it is. These energies, they can't harm you. They can't touch you whatsoever. They can't affect you. They can only make you believe that they can harm you. And it's really fascinating because it's quite similar to anxiety, worry, fear in people's lives. These energies are pretty much identical. And for me at the time, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and fear. And I thought it was me, but really it was these types of energies. And so he gave me a few techniques and taught me how to remain in my power and how to work in service of these energies, to clear them and bring them into the light. And then the next 10 years of my life after that was filled with really learning how to be free of the influence of these energies. And because they're in the world, and we interact with people who have a lot of negativity and everything else. And so how do we navigate in life free of the influence of everyone and everything, maintaining our own power and being in that what I call the sacred balance, which is the awareness of everything. including the darkness that's out there, and at the same time, it not touch you, for you to be just in your own divinity and your own power. So, and that's where the lead into the tantra of life, which is really beautiful. But one other thing that I'll add is I'm very fortunate because on my path, I started to have really beautiful experiences where I started to go to traveling to places in the world where I didn't spend a lot of time in the cities. I'd spent a lot of time in the mountains, spent a lot of time at sacred sites, spent a lot of time with animals, spent a lot of time, and I started to open even more. And when I returned, I actually traveled in South America and Central America for about 6 months. And when I returned, there was something really awakening within me. And I ended up coming back, and I went to this beautiful retreat with a spiritual teacher who teaches nothing except for brings you into a field of presence. And then you can, if you're ready for awakening, then you awaken. And I just happened to be ready for awakening. And we were doing a lot of things, like we were walking blindfolded in the desert, and we were doing sweat lodges, and we were doing a lot of time sitting outside in nature and everything else. And this was a really powerful time for me to begin with. And this was in the year 2000. And we have these cycles of solar flares that come from the sun every so often. And when we have these solar flares, it's actually this light that really affects our consciousness and can actually bring about quite a lot of awakening for us. There's really, all of life is seeking to awaken us. And so the sun has these beautiful celebratory bursts of energy, and that energy can really activate us and awaken us. And it just happened to be in the summer of 2000 when I went into a beautiful awakening into unity consciousness. And when I went into unity consciousness, I was connected with everyone and everything. And this really, really changed the way that I perceived reality and brought me into a state of enlightenment that was incredibly profound and all accepting. And in this beautiful state, I started to blossom, but it wasn't always easy. I went into the dark night of the soul, which lasted for about 1.5 years. And I really descended into hell. And it was just from a decision that I made. And really, all of us, we have one of the core aspects of being tantric masters in the tantra of life is getting to a place where we understand we have choice. And our choice has consequences for ourselves. If we choose amazing things for ourselves, we have amazing experiences and profound experiences. If we make choice that's detrimental to us, where we give up our power and those things, then we experience being powerless. We experience being in a place of darkness within ourselves. And so there's so much choice that's available. There's such a spectrum, and it's reflected in nature. It's reflected in the diversity, in the beauty, the whole spectrum that's available. And that's how we can actually attune to nature, to get a sense of how we can attune to beauty, how we can attune to power, how we can attune to, inspiration, creativity, newness, beautiful energies and renewing energies and everything else. But there's also the flip side that's there. And so it's really what we choose to attune to in it. And So hopefully that gives you a kind of a brief explanation or a synopsis of my life, but yes.
Yeah. So there's lots of places that I can go, but I want to back up and touch on a couple of things that you said. So going back to mentoring with the divine, it sounds like you're saying that there was no human. It was just a direct relationship. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's a direct relationship in that there's the way I could describe it is that it's challenging because back then was different than how it is now. Now it's evolved in so many ways. So at the time, I guess what I needed and what I conceived of most was like a divine father. And It's funny because I really, I can't say I rejected, but I was resistant to the concept of God as a man or a masculine figure or something like that even. And so, although God never came to me, in the way that some people think of God, I didn't even refer to God as God back then. I used to say the divine. And what happened was I really took a stance of gender neutrality and omniscience and everything else within my own self. And it was really fascinating because the divine would continuously come to me in various forms, often in the form of a masculine figure, but always of different races. And but always with such joy and very, very rascally, and always evoking fun. And it was very interesting because I was always very serious until recently. And every time the divine came, it was always in the form of a game, or to make fun with me, or to remind me that I'm here to have fun and that everything I do needs to have fun in it. And then even sent me my own child, who is a teacher of joy and fun and play. Because even as a child, I never played. I was so serious about the divine so early. And other than, I shouldn't say I didn't play in a normal way. I would be out in nature, and I would contact my friends at a very young age. I'd tell my parents I was going to the park, and I'd be like, let's go up into the mountains. And we'd take our bikes and go up to the mountains with a lunch, or we'd go to the ravines or whatever else. And we play these very adventuresome games like kings and queens, and we'd be riding our horses, which would be our bikes and things like that. And so I would play that way, but I never play with like Barbies or dolls or that sort of thing. I really needed adventure, and I really needed epic journeys and things like that. And so that if I could do that, that was great. Otherwise, I was really serious. I was in a very serious tone in my life, and I was very, academic and all these things. And so even my approach to the divine, even though the divine was so generous and like speaking to me, teaching me, sending me lots of different teachers, I was still quite kind of compartmentalized when it came to my own vision of what the divine was. And it wasn't until later in life that the divine just kept breaking those aspects that I conceived of, that actually I shouldn't even say conceived of, that were really, I would say, programmed into me by society. And even one of those things was even my rebelliousness to consider the masculine principle of the divine. And I wouldn't even consider the feminine principle, because that to me didn't even make sense. It was like, well, if it's not one, then it's not the other. And now I have a greater sense that certainly the divine is everything. All of life is holy. All of existence is the field of the divine. And each one of us is individuated divinity coming through in such unique ways. Even in our suffering, we are merely in an experience where we are not aware of our divinity, and that is what is suffering. And so getting into a place of being in remembrance of who we really are, and our creativity and our power to create and co-create with the field of divinity is really powerful. And one beautiful story that I'll share with you, deeply personal. I don't think I've ever even shared this with anyone. I was in this place in Brazil, in one of the most gorgeous, beautiful places on earth that I've ever been to. And I was laying underneath this tree, and the wind was blowing the tree leaves in such a pattern that was like mesmerizing. And I was like, whoa, it's almost like psychedelic. And I was like, whoa. And then the divine came in and started to address me and called me daughter. And I was in this really profound place, and started to teach me this beautiful teaching about how every leaf, every branch, every insect, every animal, every drop of water is my brother and my sister. And I was so taken by this teaching and the way that it was impressed upon my consciousness that I asked the divine, please, may I share this with the world? And, these teachings, and the divine said, yes. And so I got up to write down what I was being taught. And then the divine took over my hand and I just started transcribing a whole book on this. Basically, it's this remembrance. The book's called Play Well. And it's such a beautiful book. It's like a child could read it. It's really playful and invitational. It's the remembrance of these things, that everything is divine, and that we are here to create, to co-create, but in respect for the sovereignty of everything. And in this place where we connect, that all of nature is there to nourish us, and we're there to nourish nature, and that even water, well, everything, but water is there as an absolute blessing. And we can bless water further, but really when it's in its wholly intact state, just the way that the divine created it, without pollution of any kind, it's already blessed. And so it's when we bring in chemicals, or when we bring in any type of negativity or a type of energies that pollute in any way, that we actually create a type of corruption that imparts suffering upon us, because we drink that water, or we bathe in that water, our food is bathed in that water. And so it's a really beautiful, beautiful, expansive experience of really being in touch with the beauty and the tantra of life. The tantra of life is an active force, but it's also existence itself.
Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So with the tantra of life, so I always tell people, like, I'm a tantric master, and people are like, whoa, tell me about that. Because they think it's all to do with sex. And I'm
right.
like, sex is a great part of it. But an even greater part is the ability to prepare a salad for yourself, and to be in a joyful state, and to choose nourishing choices for yourself, like going for a walk, or like laughing with friends, hugging your friends, or connecting with people, or even when you're working, to be in a place of joy with whatever you're doing. And so it really is about it doesn't matter if you're going for a run. It's really opening to the sounds and the sights, the colors, the senses, and allowing yourself to be in that place of sensuality with life. And to experience tantra, it's not enough to, like, if we give the example of sex, it's not enough to just have sex and then everything's great. When you have sex, you want to enjoy the nuances of it. You want to enjoy the connection of it. You want to enjoy the receiving and the giving, and you want to open to the beauty, all aspects of the beauty of it, and the playfulness and all that stuff. And it's the same with life. Is like when you step into a situation where you open to not just the beauty of something that everyone might think is beautiful, but you could run past a pile of wood, driftwood. It could be driftwood. It could be like stacked plywood. It doesn't matter. It could be a pile of garbage. It doesn't even matter. But to be able to see the art of it, to be able to like recognize that's never going to look the same again. I can run past here, every single day for the rest of my life. And that pile is always going to be different. It's going to be deteriorating in a certain way. The light's going to be shining on it in a particular way. And it's the same thing within our everyday life, whether it's a pile of laundry or a pile of dishes. Even if we sat in our rooms, like our living room, day in and day out, it will never be the same again. It will always have a slightly different shade and tone when it comes to light and color. There will be particles of dust descending in certain ways and patterns. And so all of life, this is the most beautiful and fascinating thing about life, is nothing's ever the same. We are absolutely entertained by creation itself as it evolves and changes and creates newness. And we're the same. We're never the same. And we're always in a place where sometimes when we suffer, it's because we might be attached to like, oh, I want it to be the way it was last week, or I want it to be the way it was last year, or when I was 5 years old, or whatever else. And if we can always understand the principle of the ever changing nowness of existence, and if we can join the celebration and the joy and the peace and the ecstasy, and I call it like this beautiful place of peaceful aliveness, where you are in that sacred balance, where you're not in the extreme of like total non-movement and not in the extreme of total ecstasy where you can't function, but in a place where you've got both stillness and aliveness coursing through your beingness all at the same time. And I can feel it even just talking about it. The activation of it is so powerful and potent. And I'm sure that the people who are listening can feel as I'm speaking about it. It just evokes, within a person this place of excitement and joy, but from a place of sobriety. And that's one thing that happened to me when I received this beautiful teaching, this book called Play Well from the Divine. I went into such gratitude at one point in the transcription of the book that I was down on the ground in the dirt on my belly, and I was expressing such gratitude, and I felt I was going to go into absolute annihilation, into the total field, unity field. And the divine said to me, you have work to do, sober yourself up and get back to work. And I was like, wonderful. Okay. And what happened was when I was firmed this way, and I call it being firmed, when I was firmed this way, I got back to work immediately. And I was like in agreement, of course, because the divine is instructing me and I trust those instructions. And the moment I got to work, I noticed that this gratitude and joy was just radiating from me. And it's never left me. And so I'm in this place of ecstasy, but I remember when I first went into unity consciousness back in the year 2000, it would be like I'd go into this orgasmic ecstasy and my kundalini would rise up and shoot out the top of my head. And then I would take a day to recover, and then I'd go back into that ecstatic state. And it's like in tantra, they teach men how they can have sex without ejaculating, but they can be orgasmic, or they retain that the energy of the orgasm within themselves. And what was happening is I didn't know anything about energy back then. Hadn't been taught by an energy teacher or anything, or at that point. It came about 2 years after that I started to learn about how to cycle energy and everything else. So at the time, what happened was I was so surrendered to the divine that my crown was open, and I was so activated that my kundalini was literally shooting out the top of my head out into the universe for anybody to eat, you could say, or enjoy the nourishment of. And for anybody out there who does any type of spiritual practices, one of the things two things that can happen when your kundalini rises, and that's really important to know about, is one, if your crown's open, it will shoot out. And as ecstatic and amazing as it feels, you're losing your energy and you need to seal your crown. Number two is if your crown is sealed and your kundalini energy shoots up up your spine to the top of your head, if you don't keep your tongue on the roof of your mouth, it will get stuck in your head and will drive you crazy. You'll have pain in your head. You'll be very angry and agitated. It can cause a lot of negative symptoms. And so if you happen to be opening, and nature can open you, it can activate your kundalini really easily when you surrender into that beautiful beauty and the energy of nature. If it happens, it's really important that you keep your tongue on the roof of your mouth. What that does is connects the circuit in the energy circuit in your body and allows the energy to flow naturally and for it to be maintained. And then you can use it and store it. First of all, store it in your abdomen and use it to go to higher states of consciousness. But if it shoots out of your crown, then you can't use it. It's gone. It's lost. Not lost. The rest, someone in the universe is going to access that and enjoy it, but it won't be you necessarily. So I was really fortunate to learn how to go into the sacred balance, which is to be in a place of ecstasy and joy, but from a place of sobriety, which is I'm aware of what's going on in the world. Some people want to escape what's happening. I'm very aware of it as an unconditional observer, and I'm in my own joy state. And this is what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to symbology, like a cross, whether it's like an Irish or a Druidic type cross, or if it's any type of Christian cross or any other type of cross. There's like various crosses represented around the world, but it can be anything. It can be even the Star of David or anything, a circle. The very center point is the place of balance. And so I love the crosses that are in the world that have the circle surrounding it, like the sun in the center point. And the very center point of the circle or the cross or the star, which is the set, basically is where you want to be, is in perfect balance and harmony within yourself. And all of nature represents that. I mean, we have a planet that's circular. We have a sun that appears to us circular, a moon that appears circular. We have, when we talk about unity, we talk about cohesion, we talk about circular energies and connecting in those ways. But if we go to any point, on the circle, we're not accessing the whole. And so to be in the very center, at the very core, where we are actually radiating out into all possibilities from a place of power within ourselves. This is how we activate. This is how we maintain and embody the tantra of life, and in a very balanced way, where we're not getting into trouble within ourselves, where we can actually survey existence from a place of not getting attached or sucked into or influenced by other people's ideas. Or it doesn't mean that you don't consider anybody's ideas, because from that vantage point, you can consider anything. And so it's a really powerful place to be when you are a tantric master at the very place of balance within your own life.
I'm assuming that would apply also to the divine masculine and feminine.
Correct. And so what happens now, this is challenging for some people when they talk about it, because some people don't realize that we really need to have the divine masculine and divine feminine balanced within each of us. If there's not, then we end up, there's usually at the root of that, there's emotional conflicts that are related to our parenting, or the way that the masculine and feminine are perceived or on display in media and entertainment and everything else. And so one of the things that when I work with people one-on-one, when they come to me, there's often some sort of imbalance. And sometimes women will come to me and they'll be in a place of challenge with a partner, or men will come to me and the same thing, whether they're heterosexual, homosexual, doesn't matter. Whatever their sexual preferences, doesn't matter. If there's an imbalance between the divine masculine and divine feminine, they're going to run into relationship problems. They're going to run into their own personal imbalances within their own minds and everything else. And narcissism is one of the biggest things these days. People call it narcissism. It's a kind of a catch-all for a bunch of emotional conflicts that are occurring within someone. But narcissism, when it comes to the masculine, or to men in particular, comes from a place where they are really not in balance with the needs of the feminine. It doesn't need to be their partner, just even their own feminine needs. or the divine feminine within them. And it's because they've learned to shut that down. They've learned to disregard or dismiss. They've learned to compartmentalize, and so then there can be quite a lot of balance. And the same with women. Women can also be narcissistic in some ways, but women en masse tend to go to codependency and making things comfortable for narcissists more so than men. Although it can happen, men also can be codependent with narcissistic women, but it's in some ways it's kind of balanced in the way that happens. But really, what we're being called to do when we come into the knowing and the power of our own divinity is to ensure that all aspects of ourselves are fully integrated and in balance. And then from that place, we're not at the whim of what I call the illusion, that which wants to keep us in the dark about our power and who we are and our divinity. And so we can get caught up in stories about what it is to be a woman or what it is to be a man. Mm-hmm. And these things can come up in ways where, like, women feel like they need to seduce a man, or that a man has to do everything they want, or they're not loved. And it can go out of balance in those types of ways. And so it really is about coming into a place when you can free yourself from the influence of what anyone thinks of you or believes about you or believes you should do or shouldn't do, and come into a place with what's truly nourishing for you, that causes no harm to anybody else. Because there are a lot of people are like, well, I love doing this. And meanwhile, they're actually enslaving somebody else. And they think that that's their truth and that's what brings them joy. And it's like, well, yeah, it brings some people joy to kill people. And so, but that's not helpful for the rest of us, you know, and there's a whole bunch of other dark stuff I could go into that people can justify because it's pleasurable to them or gives them something. And so it really is from a place of beginning to meet your needs without needing anybody else to meet those needs. Like begin meeting those needs from a place of your own self-acceptance, your own self-compassion, your own nourishment of clean drinking water, healthy foods, spending time in nature, right? The basics.
Very basics, yeah. So how did your time in the Amazon influence your path?
Well, I went to Brazil twice, once to the Amazon and then once to this beautiful area called Bahia. Probably not pronouncing that the right way, but it's beautiful, magical place in Northeast Brazil. And that's where I had the experience underneath this tree, was in Northeast Brazil. But I did go to the Amazon. And when I was in the Amazon, I went to visit a tribe called the Yawanawa tribe. And I have to say, when I first arrived there, I was really tired because it took 3.5 days to get there, because we were deep in the Amazon on the Peru border. And so we had to fly from Canada to somewhere in the US, and then from somewhere in the US, I think it was Florida or something, and then to Brazil on the far west or east coast, and then we had to fly into the interior. And so it was 3.5 days later, including a 7-hour boat ride on an Amazonian river. No bathrooms or anything like that. And it's so funny. These boats are so shallow and very tippy, because in the dry season, the water in the Amazon rivers are quite shallow. And so you can't even move to one side a little bit or even fall asleep and drop your head down, because you'll tip the boat. And so you're 7 hours wide awake, and the noise is you can't even listen to music or anything like that. You can't hear the birds or anything because the motor's so loud. But so you're on this journey and you arrive at night, and I was so exhausted. But the Yawanawa tribe were very generous with their teachings, and on the first night that we arrived, before we went to bed, they had someone playing music for us, sitting around a fire. And I heard this one. I mean, all the songs were deeply familiar to me, but there was this one song in particular that this man was singing, and luckily I had a translator that was sitting around with us, and I asked her to ask him, where he learned the song, because it was so familiar to me that I felt like he had taken a pop song that was like, that I'd known my whole life, and he had somehow like made it his own. And he was like, no, the forest taught me this song. And I was like, but that's my song. Like, I knew it was my song. And I'm like, it was such a profound experience. And so I went to bed that night, and I didn't know what I was going to really experience. And we woke up the next day, and we went into this beautiful sharing. It was a group of us women, actually, who went to do ceremony with the first ever female pages and shamans in the Amazon forest. It was really amazing, 21 of us women. And after our sharing circle, they brought the young women in to paint our faces with this local dye from this one tree. And the moment this young woman started to paint my face, I felt I was being anointed by the divine. And my eyes were open, and I was looking out into the forest, and I realized I had always been there. I'd never not been there, and that the forest was always in my heart. And I was just completely one with the forest. And I surrendered to the forest for its teachings. And I was there for 7 days. And every single day, the forest taught me directly. A lot of the other women were, learning from the Yuwanawa tribe and everything else. I was too. But the morning, noon, and night, even when I was sleeping, I barely slept the whole time I was there. I barely ate. I was being nourished by the forest, just by the prana itself. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no electricity, nothing like that. And the forest would actually move me. So I'd wake up in the morning, go have some food to eat, what they had there, some of what they were growing and some of what they brought in from the city, like rice and things like that. But I would go into this kind of area where they would kind of gather, and they would play music for us, like all waking hours, and sometimes all through the night. If we were up, they would be up with us playing music for us, teaching us their songs, which are very activating. I have to say, they're like deep mantras. And some of them actually had very similar Vedic and Sanskrit sounding sounds. And when I asked them about this, they said, we don't even know the language of these songs. They're not even our own language. We're just carrying the tradition of it, and we've been guided to keep these traditions going, and to share them with the world. And so when I was hearing these songs, and the beautiful forest was affecting me, what happened is it would move me, and I started going to these beautiful dance movements almost the whole time I was there. No one else was doing this. The Yuwanawa, some of them were like a little weirded out by it. Some of the Yuwanawa, the elders were like, wow, they knew me as the woman who danced. But I wasn't dancing like, like to music or something like that. I was being moved by the forest, and the forest was teaching anyone around me who was watching. I had these hand movements and leg movements and arm movements. And there's this one beautiful tree called the Sama Uma tree. It's the tallest tree in the Amazon forest. I didn't know anything about the plants or the birds or anything before I went there. And I was underneath this Sama Uma tree, and the forest started to move me in this movement where I was moving my hands up like the trunk of the tree, and then my hands out into like the canopy of the tree. And then the tree, the forest had me moving around in a circle, almost like a sprinkler, and spraying out this energy out into the forest all the way down, right down to the ground. And it had me do this movement over and over and over again, and also spraying the energy out into like the universe. And I'm like getting goosebumps just talking about it. It's so profound. And so what happened is, after we left the Yuwanawa tribe and left this portion of the Amazon, and we got to the highway after taking a 7-hour boat ride back, we went down to this other river and traveled up that river to another community that was a white community. They weren't indigenous people. but they had this small little community, and they would take people on these boat tours up their river. And so we were on this boat tour, and somebody said, "Hey, tell us about the Sama tree." And he's like, "Oh, this tree is really fascinating. It's like the mother of all trees. It basically, in the rainy season, it sucks up the water up the trunk and then stores it in the canopy and in the trunk. And then in the dry season, it rains down like a sprinkler on all the other trees." And I was like, "What?" And so I would receive this level of teaching from the forest. And because I was so surrendered, it just continuously taught me. And then it instructed me, go home and teach everyone that the Amazon forest is not just the lungs of the world, but the heart of the world. And the Amazon wanted people to know that it loves everyone. And it's asking for the love and protection of the world. And I was so affected by this invitation and by all the mentorship I received that was ongoing. And even, like I said, when I would go to bed at night, I'd lay down, and there was no rest. It was just pure teaching after teaching after teaching. And I didn't even want to rest. The truth is I wanted, and I chose to receive as much teaching as I possibly could receive. I think I had 2 nights I slept, partial nights, but other than that, and I never slept during the day, even napping. I just was I was like a sponge, really, truly.
So what would you say to somebody who can't tap into nature, doesn't know how to do that, doesn't have visitations from the divine? How can they touch that?
That's a great question, because it really is available to all of us.
Yeah.
And for people who have not been taught by their parents, because there's so much that's been lost because of the way that we've been programmed or indoctrinated year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, to really be disconnected and to really rely on supermarkets and our government and our educational system and authorities to tell us like how to be in life. And so the best thing that I can say is it comes down to the most important thing, and that is choice. When you realize you have a choice to open to these things, you can do it. You need to be discerning. It's not about just opening to just anything.
Yes, thanks for saying that.
Right, because there's a lot of people who open to spiritual stuff or energies, and they actually end up hurting them. And so one of the most important things, because I had a friend once who she used to channel, but she channeled like unknown entities. And then she ended up in a psychiatric ward. And when I went to visit her, I said, "What are you doing? Like, why wouldn't you channel the highest creator of all? Why wouldn't you channel truth? Why wouldn't you channel love? Like, why would you channel this unknown entity called Greg or something like that? Like you don't even know what that is." And so when I say it comes to choice, this is how you choose. I'm going to teach you how to choose. You say something along the lines of, "I choose to open to truth. I choose to be mentored by truth," with a capital T, not Susie's truth or Ben's truth or or that person in that country's truth or that indigenous person's truth or that Asian person's truth or whatever. No, we all have our own experiences, but that's not truth. That's just experience. When you really want to open to the divine and you want to open to being mentored in truthful ways, then truth with a capital T. And then opening to mentorship from the divine. And here's the thing, the divine will never invite you per se. You might kind of get like a bit of a type of invitation. You might feel inspired to ask or something like that, but the divine is consensual. And so the divine will never pressure you, push you, or anything. And so it really requires our free will, which everyone has, and to make a decision and say, I choose to surrender to truth, or I choose to surrender to the teachings of the divine, or I choose to surrender to my own divinity. these are really powerful and high level surrenders. We're not just surrendering to, so-and-so or such and such. It's actually very specific, high level truth, high level divinity. And there are lots of, certainly there's high level teachers. You can actually ask the soul of love, the teacher of love, to teach you about love, which is actually the principle, the divine principle of love. You can ask the divine principle of peace to teach you. So anything that's of high vibration and high value to you, to assist you to be in that place. And so for me, when I started to be mentored by the divine, it's because I said, okay, God, if you exist, then I have these questions I'd like you to answer. And I trust that if you exist, you're going to answer them for me. And the divine did that for me. And so it really is coming into a place where you make the choice. You're like, I choose to open to this. I choose to be mentored in peace. I choose to be mentored in love. I choose to be mentored about my own divinity. And then it makes it possible. And then one of the things that I teach people that's really powerful is asking questions in the affirmative. And so these are not questions that your mind answers, because your mind is all about old stuff and programming. And your mind is there to assist you, but it's not you. It is you, but in a higher level way, but it's not in the way you think it is. Your mind is there to assist you. It is there to serve you. And so if you feel anxious or frustrated or angry, it's because your ego mind is driving your life. If you want to be in a place of peace, then you need to direct yourself by free will and choice, by instructing your mind, I choose peace, I choose love, I choose, whatever it is that you want to experience. And so then when you ask a question in the affirmative, it's a question for your mind to serve you. And I'm going to give an example of a question, and then I'm going to explain it further. So an affirmative question that isn't to be answered like by you in that moment is a question like, why is it so joyful to open my heart to nature? So you're not looking for a mental answer to that, but you're asking the question of your own mind. And what happens is your mind goes, I don't know, let me find out why it's so joyful to open my heart to nature. And then it attracts experiences because your own mind is now focused on that rather than focused on anxiety, rather than being like, so if you ask yourself a negative question, like, for example, why am I always so tired? Your mind's going to, I don't know, let me find out. And it's going to find out all the reasons why you're so tired. Or why am I, sometimes people have these really negative questions that they ask about themselves, like, why am I always so stupid? And instead, a far better question is, why is it so joyful to learn new things? Or why is it so joyful to expand my consciousness? Or why is it so joyful to learn about that particular thing that I want to learn about? Or why is it so empowering to learn about it? Or why is it so easy to learn about this thing? And so then your mind becomes oriented toward that which is positive for yourself and affirmative for yourself. And so you could ask these questions even about your own divinity. Why is it so enlightening to know who I am? Why is it so empowering for my mind and energy and body to be enlightened? Why is it so joyful to surrender to my divinity? And then from these places, you can even just feel like how joyful that is. It's like, oh, that sounds joyful. I would love that. And then the mind's like, oh, okay, there's like this energy like of joy that's associated when she says it. She must really want this, because your mind doesn't care what kind of energy you have, whether it's joy or fear. It just goes, oh, there's energy in this. I'm going to go with this. And so if you think like, why is the world so scary? Your mind's like, let's find out why it's so scary. and so it will put all its energy toward that. And so instead, if you say, why are there so many loving people in the world? Why is it so easy to attract amazing, generous, loving friends in my life? Why is it so inspirational to come up with solutions to this situation, then the mind is really poised for greatness. It's actually, you're utilizing it in the best possible way to activate your consciousness, your divinity, your connection with nature, your connection with truth, your connection with unity consciousness, your connection with divine consciousness. And so I say all these things from a place, not because I've read a book about any of this. This is my actual embodiment. This is what I experience on a day-to-day basis. I'm in a place of near 24/7 ongoing peace, joy, and equanimity. And I have such joy in my heart and such connection. I have the most amazing friends that I've attracted into my life. And it's from applying these very simple principles of asking affirmative questions, making choices that are in the affirmative for myself, and choosing to surrender. And then the flip side of it is, let's say you have something in your life that's really detrimental. It could be, let's say you have an addiction to cheesecake, or it could be an addiction to cigarettes or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. I give these two kind of ones. They're relatively light compared to some other addictions. But it could be even an addiction to like a really toxic relationship or something like that as well. And so one of the things you can say is, I choose to be indifferent to cheesecake. And so indifference is not interested. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I want to dislike it or hate it, because there's still energy in that. And your mind's like, energy with cheesecake, even if it's like hate, right? And so you want to be indifferent. You want your mind to be like, oh, that's boring. And so when you say I choose, paired with to be indifferent to cheesecake, when you have the option for having cheesecake, then what you do is you walk away. Now your mind might protest because it thinks you want the cheesecake because you've always chosen the cheesecake in the past. And so you have to say, no, I'm choosing to be indifferent to cheesecake. And if it protests again, you're like, I've chosen to be indifferent to cheesecake, and you walk away from the cheesecake. Then the next time there's an opportunity for cheesecake, you may go, your mind might be like, hey, that's a really unique flavor of cheesecake. How about that cheesecake? And you're like, no, I choose to be indifferent to that cheesecake. And then you walk away again. By the third time you walk away, your mind will have it that you choose to be indifferent. Because a lot of people are like, it's so hard to let go of stuff. You just have to be able to do it 3 times. And then the 4th time, and I've tested this my own self, because I used to have an addiction to cheesecake, if you can believe it. So that's why I give this example. But what happened is, I remember the 4th time that I went into a patisserie, a bakery, and my mind actually said to me, no, we're indifferent to cheesecake. And I just smiled. I'm like, yes. And I walked out. And so you really need to be firm with your mind, but it's not using your willpower to try to keep yourself from it, because that's too much energy around it. It really is about, I just choose to be indifferent and to turn your attention to something else. Now, it can be the same with like anger or judgment. Let's say you're judging someone and you're like, whoa, I just don't want to judge people, but I keep judging. I keep having negative thoughts about somebody or something like that. You can say to your mind, like, I choose to free that person from my influence. Meaning, I choose to let them be themselves. I choose to let them have their own free will and decide for themselves whether they slouch, whether they swear, whether they eat crappy foods, whether they speak meanly, whether they cut me off in traffic, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because no matter what you do in life, you cannot stop somebody unless you go back in time from doing what they've already done. And so it's insane to be attached to them doing something else. It's already done. So you can accept that they've used their free will to do whatever they've chosen to do. And this is pretty extreme, but that can be literally that they've raped somebody or killed someone. However, it doesn't mean that you agree that that's a good thing, or that you think that people should do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they've used their divinity to cause harm upon someone. That's their choice. And if you can free them from your belief that they should do something else, then you will be free. Because I can guarantee that you've made tons of mistakes in your life, maybe not to that extreme. And if someone came up and was like, well, you lied when you were 7 years old, and so you are a terrible person for the rest of your life, or you stole something when you were 12 years old, and so you should be condemned for the rest of your life. We all, as evolving beings, make mistakes, and we go down paths that are harmful even to our own selves. There's tons of people who abuse drugs and alcohol, food, people who stay up crazy hours and don't get enough sleep. That's self-abuse. And so all of us have free will to choose for ourselves. And it's really important that we choose wisely, but we also need to free other people to choose. And it doesn't mean that we don't have other choices within society that we collectively agree to. For example, if someone murders someone, then we have a process where if they are found that they have done that they go to jail for a certain amount of time, that there's consequences to your actions, of course, especially with some things like this. However, it's your stance, it's your energy. And if you are angry with somebody for doing something, if you are judging them, you're telling your own mind and the universe that you get to be judged for anything that you do wrong, that you get to be rejected for anything you do wrong. And so to be in a place where you can have compassion, that if somebody murders somebody, you understand what might have happened to them when they were children, what might have happened to them in their life, what's going on biochemically, what kind of foods are they eating, what kind of influence are they experiencing that has corrupted them so much that they would take the life of another human being and think that it's okay. That's a level of suffering within someone that is so extreme. And it's not just because they're like, oh, I just feel like killing somebody today. It's really not what's going on. When we have people incarcerated, we have them incarcerated because they're so broken. And really what they need, even if they are, found guilty of a particular crime, what they need is rehabilitation, not punishment. And that's one of the things, I wasn't thinking of talking about this today, but that's one of the things that the divine has mentored me to mentor parents, but everyone else too, is that we're done with punishment. We're not punishing people anymore, is what the divine has very clearly said to me. And I remember when I told a few parents this, they were like so relieved because they thought they had to punish their children. They were like, well, what if my child does something wrong? Like, well, then you mentor them in why it was wrong and what's the better way, and let them know the consequences to the person that they've harmed, and ask them how they feel about that and everything else, and have them engaged in a whole process. But if you send a child to their room to punish them, you're telling them, if you do something wrong, you're going to be rejected. And they feel so much shame that they're not included with the family. Like, the number of people I've worked with that they were like, I honestly thought when I got into trouble that my parents would kick me out, that they wouldn't take care of me, that they wouldn't be there for me. As young children, they were terrified that parents, if they went further than what they did, it was bad enough they were sent to their room to be alone by themselves and unacceptable to their family. But they were like, if I do even worse, now they might actually push me out of the house. And then what am I going to do? And so we have this concept in society where we are punitive with people, and it's created a lot of mental illness. And most of the people who are incarcerated have mental illness because they've been neglected, they haven't been cared for properly emotionally. And so it's really important that we have the opportunity, and it's just an invitation, you could do whatever you want, but to really free other people from our judgment, to free them from expectation. And that allows us to then retain the right to be free of other people's expectations and judgments. And for us to begin to make choices that are not enslaving choices like, oh, if I don't do that, that person's going to reject me. If I don't do that, that person's going to judge me. oh, if I don't do that, that other mother is going to think that there's something wrong with me. It's like, if we're behaving that way, we're not free. And if we're putting our judgments and expectations on others, then we're actually creating enslavement energetically in the world as well. So we have the opportunity to be loving and firm. It doesn't mean we accept people's behavior. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we are lovingly firm what's acceptable and unacceptable. At the same time, we free everybody to choose for themselves, even if they choose to use drugs and kill themselves. That's their choice, their free will, and their journey in this lifetime. We don't know why they came here and what they chose to come here to experience, and we need to let them make their choices for themselves.
I agree.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Anyway, there's like a whole bunch of teachings, like all rolled up in a ball in all of this, but
yeah, people need to hear that. So can you tell people where to get your book and how to contact you?
So I have a website called tarabianca.com. And right now I'm transitioning into making everything free on my website. So the Divine has invited me to make everything free. And I'm going to be offering a course called Freedom from Influence, which is actually a more expanded talk about and teaching around this. And it involves some teachings and recordings, some meditations that can help to really bring you into a place where not only do you free other people from your influence, but you are truly free from the influence of other people and not worried about what people think about you, not even worried about when a negative thought comes up in your mind, you can even be free of the influence of your own mind. And so you can check those things out. My books, you can find my books there, but if you go to Amazon and you look up Tara Bianca, I have 3 books out. 2 of them we'll talk about. One's called The Flower of Heaven, Opening the Divine Heart Through Conscious Friendship and Love Activism, which is a really beautiful book that can teach you so many things about how to love yourself and love others. As well, there's an activation into surrender in that book, which is so powerful. And then another book called Play Well, period. Like it's actually play well, period. And it's basically an invitation for God for us to play well together, for us to take care of each other, for us to take care of nature. And so, because all of existence is us, all of existence is our brother and sister. And so everything is a reflection of our own self, and to really have respect for the water, for forests, for insects, plants, for each of us, for the stars, the sun, the moon, and everything else. And so it's a real beautiful experience. And then I have another book that you can watch for. It's called The Greatest Gift, and it's going to be coming out probably later this year. But it's a really powerful type mantra prayer book. It's really beautiful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to close by sending gratitude to you. Thank you. Sending gratitude to the elements, our loving, helping ancestors. If you found this helpful, please check out Tara's website, or you can donate to us too at pansociety.net. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Laura Giles from Modern Animism Radio, and I will see you next week.